Hello, I'm Nick Dixon, and welcome to another edition of what for now we're calling Dixon Cox. It's another penetrating episode of Dixon Cox with Paul Cox, the star of GB News and the Comedy World. If you don't know the show, basically it's one of Britain's most insightful commentators and Paul Cox. Paul, how are you doing? I'm sorry, I don't know why I did
No,
that.
no, no. I don't. You shouldn't apologise because I know you genuinely mean that as a statement. I'm good, mate. I mean, it's that weird period between Christmas and New Year. Not that weird because today's actually New Year's Eve, and
Calvin Robinson will pounce on you and say that's simply called Christmas. This is
yeah, I
all
mean
part
it
of
is, isn't
Christmas.
it? It's that sort of 12 days of Christmas business. I'm not sure what day this is, but runs right up to the 6th. I tend to celebrate Christmas 1st to 31st. Done.
Calvin was saying that technically the Christmas period lasts until I believe it's February 6th or something. So that's a long old Christmas, isn't it? So we've
That
got
is.
that to
Well, I mean,
enjoy.
what are we celebrating beyond? Are they
Imagine having
going
to
all the
see
way up
your
to?
family until February.
That can't be right. That can't be
So
healthy.
I'm honor bound to ask really what you did for Christmas, Paul.
It was quite quiet actually. Usual sort of family type stuff. I've got a daughter, so Christmas is about children. They say things like that, Nick. So I felt like I should parrot that. I don't really know what that means. It is, isn't it? I mean, if you're 6, Christmas is amazing, and then you realise there isn't the strange man who comes down your chimney and empties his sack on the end of your bed, and then it's all a bit, what can you get me?
You saying you're a Santa denier, Paul? This is what I'm
Um,
hearing.
well, I think our listeners and viewers are pretty much up on that story. I mean, we can cover it if they're not.
No, it's back. Santa's back, and now people believe in him, and they call anyone. Have you not seen this? They call anyone on the other side a Santa denier.
Yeah,
And there is, and I get it. I get it. Really, we want to bring back Santa into our culture and not have these atheistic Santa deniers. They tend to be atheists.
yeah. If it's yes, I'm quite happy at 45 to believe in Santa if it means that we can preserve the rest of our culture. By which I mean Judeo-Christian culture in Britain, which is very much undermined these days. And even as I said it, I almost whispered it as if to say, "Oh my God,
Well, you got it
say
wrong. It's
something."
Christian culture, but we can work on that. The what I was going to say,
Fair enough.
the I'm named after the bloke. I mean, it's Saint Nicholas, isn't it?
Yeah, you
Really?
are. I mean, I don't know if that was the reason your parents chose the name, but
Well, it comes from the Christian canon, doesn't it? So we've all got Christian names in my family. Christian names, if you know what I mean.
yeah,
Um,
sorry. I really did muddy the waters there, didn't I? My Judeo-Christian statement, which,
Sorry, it's
is.
just the wrong podcast for it, mate. This is the this is the Christian nationalist podcast. No, I don't. I don't even think of myself as a proper Christian. I must be a Christian. I am one. We don't get into this, but I am one by birth. I am a Protestant English Christian. That's just who I am, whether I want to be or not. So when I'm not great as an observing Christian, but that's just what I am. I think we should stop all this silliness. "Oh, I'm an atheist," well, whatever. I just think I went to a Church of England school. We grew up singing hymns. I am what I am. So as I get older, I realize so much of my sort of moral outlook is informed by being a English Protestant. Uh, that just it is a set of values, whether
Yeah.
you like it or not.
I mean, I've probably got closer to God as I've got older. I was christened, and we went to school in the 80s and 90s, so we sung hymns. There were assemblies would have had their foundation in the Christian faith, and there would have been songs related to God and Jesus. There would have been hymns, and Jehovah's Witnesses would have left for half an hour and sat in the library until we were done. And that was all
Yes,
considered
and that's how it should be.
perfectly reasonable.
Get
Yeah, I
out,
mean, we should
everyone,
do.
get out,
Yeah, perhaps we should have
except
a
Christians.
section on the podcast where one of us just leaves while the other one continues with their with whatever they want to say. And
There was a
away.
moment. Sorry, I just cut you off. There was a moment I realized my nephews and niece would not learn the things that we're taking for granted. They're like, "Oh, we don't want to really sort of indoctrinate them." It's like, well, you're indoctrinating them into something. Believe me, it's just you're indoctrinating them into leftism instead. Because if they go to a state school, they will learn a whole load of garbage. Why not have them learn the Christian fundamentals? We don't know what happens when you take that away. Really, I think it's a monstrous experiment.
Well, we're starting to see. I think we saw it with the latter millennials. Less, it seems less so with the Gen Z. There seems to be a reaction from Gen Z to the latter millennials. By which I mean, I mean, I was born in '79. I'm guessing you must have been born. I'm not sometime in the '80s, early '80s, Nick. But what that means is I am right on the cusp. I'm actually considered a Generation X by some people, and
You are X. I'm technically millennial, but I'm the very start of millennial. You're
yeah,
X. Though I think, Paul, you get into this golden world of the Zennials, because I don't. I'll let you finish your point in a sec. I'm being very rude today, but I just want to say that you are a Zennial because they start in 77 to 83. They are the
well,
golden chosen people. And Carl
that's
Benjamin is
us,
one.
isn't it?
Nima is one. Ed Dutton. There's just loads of people, but less controversial people are that as well. But millennials are kind of a sacred people. They instinctively agree on things. They understand the world. They have the sort of like the realism of Gen X, but without the complete cynicism. They have the irony. They have the humor. They don't get worried about words and like being offended. But they have a bit more. They have the empathy of the millennial, so they're not completely cold like Gen X. But they're better than all of them. And obviously, they're not like just crazy like Zoomers that they can tie their shoelaces and order off a menu. So you know what I mean? They're just, and they're not boomers, obviously. So they're just a kind of perfect generation. And it's a it's a tiny. I mean, it's only a 6 year window, and you're lucky enough to be in it.
Yeah, and we very much straddled two worlds as well, sort of pre-internet, pre-computer world, imperial world, and metric world, and post-internet world, and everything that came with that. So we had an understanding of the difference, or at least the delta between the two worlds, which latter millennials didn't have at all because they would have had lots of computers at school instead of one BBC Acorn. They'd have had access to the internet the whole of their life. So they never had to forage in the woods for pornography, and they had access to anything that they needed. That's not what the internet's for, by the way. It's not just pornography, and I think I would advise people to to do
Paul
less of
spent
it. That would
Paul
be
spent
my.
most of his upbringing foraging for pornography. By the way, it was just
But that was actually a skill in as I was growing up. It's lost now.
yeah.
A
There was a
porn
whole
forager.
trade. I mean, there was a whole
Yeah. You
culture
could just
like the
you got a
miners. Thatcher
sense.
shut all that down.
Yeah, took away the milk, took away the porn in the bushes.
Yeah, and just to be, I mean, I'm sorry to get into this digression, but just to be clear, I'm very much a moderate on the Xennial question. I consider anyone not a Xennial to be scum. Literally, anyone outside of that 6 year period, Paul. That's just what I believe. Those are
Yeah, I
my
mean,
beliefs.
famous for being a moderate as always, Nick. I mean, I don't know what to
Yes.
say about
In fact, if you're not a straight white male from a comprehensive school born between those years, you are absolute scum.
that. Chucking a laugh at the end in case it gets clear.
It's just I couldn't sustain the stupidity of my own
Do you
persona.
know what though? We are so close to the end times on a whole bunch of societal things that actually, well, even well-thinking, intelligent people, if they were told there was a place where people that looked the same as them, thought the same as them, had the same ideas as them, all had started an island and a community somewhere, we'd probably join it now. We'd
Yeah.
probably just go, do you know what? That'll do me. I'll see out the rest of my days on White Island. Thank you.
Are you proposing a sort of white island
I don't
ethno
know
state,
what.
Paul?
I mean, I don't know what I'm proposing. It sounds very dangerous. It's in its infancy, Nick. It's in its
Okay, fair enough.
infancy.
Yeah, you need to think that one through. Yeah, some people, you might accidentally invent a new Israel. Anyway, just make that really controversial. We got into such terrible territory there so quickly. I was all I asked you was what you did for Christmas. You invented an ethno island.
And even Ed Davey can come along. We don't know what he's done. That's why we haven't spoken about him. I'd imagine
Right.
that I imagine he had a wonderful Christmas, totally devoid of policy.
Do you know what I worked out? I worked out how Ed Davies' career is going to end. I just thought of this today. Do you know how it's going to end?
How's it going to
He's
end,
going to do a rap song and accidentally say the N word. I figured it out. It's so obvious. He'd be like, today I'm in South London, and you hear a lot about these drill rap gangs these days. But what's it all about? And he gets in with, I got involved to see if I could do my own drill rap, and it's just the most cringe video you've ever seen. And he tries to copy a drill rap, but he drops an N bomb. Everyone goes silent, looks at him. Music stops, and, one guy's
Do you know
laughing.
what? I can see that happening. What we should say, by the way, and I get this comment probably more than you do because I've got Ed Davey corner. It's a hill I've pretty much created for myself. People will constantly remind us of the post office scandal, and rightly so. Ed Davey did have some involvement in that. Some would say, for balance, that he had advisors and they advised him poorly. Others would say, probably rightly, that he should have done a lot more to prevent that scandal. I just thought I'd mention that just for balance, because, by the way, we're trying to be amusing.
Right, but we're not trying to launder Ed Davies' image, if that's what we're being
No,
accused of.
exactly. I mean, I don't know. That's a good point, actually. Just the first hours on just poking holes in Ed Davies' personality.
Yeah, I mean, I thought we were mercilessly taking the piss out of him, but that's been seen as like running cover for his post office scandal. Yeah, the post office scandal was appalling. That is true.
Yeah,
Yeah,
there
no
you
one's
go.
doubting that. No one's doubting that. You know what? I've just realised as well, Paul, as well as being exactly the same Zennials, we're both just like wearing the same thing. It's like some sort of quarter zip. Mine's Lacoste. What is yours? It looks like some sort
Yeah,
of.
this is Fat Face, which is
Okay.
which is not was a nickname at one point, to be fair. But it's even got like these. It's got these little duffel buttons, and I don't know. Reminds me of the '80s. I had a duffel coat. We all had a duffel coat in the '80s, didn't we? I don't know. Wrapped up in some. That was when you used wood for buttons. Great times.
Yeah, wood for buttons, you forage for porn, much simpler times. So we've done so much there. I almost don't want to. It's too late to even get on to New Year, but we can get onto that maybe in the paid section at the end.
Yeah, why not?
People can look forward to that because it's actually, yeah, like you say, it's New Year's Eve as we record, and I've not even thought about it. To me, that's just another day.
Yeah, of
All the
course it
days
is.
are the
Yeah.
same to me. I don't acknowledge it. I will not acknowledge it on our special island. It doesn't exist. And
Special
Ed Davy
Island.
Island. Um, so yeah, we may as well get into the actual blooming stories, I guess. Although people like the banter, and they've had a good 10 minutes of it
Oh,
there of
absolutely.
excellent banter.
Gold.
Um, yeah, so we should get into the stories, and I think the big one. I don't want to repeat my video that I already did, but the big one has got to be Elon Musk versus MAGA. And I've already done a video on this on YouTube. If you want to check out all the facts, I'll give a brief overview for those that haven't seen that. And by the way, why aren't you subscribed? Please subscribe to my YouTube channel. Please like this video. And if you want the full version of this podcast, go to nickdixon.net. That's what I meant to say. That's where they all are. And you'll get all the full version. It gets much more spicy. And if you look at what we said on the non-paywall bit, imagine how
Yeah.
obscene it gets on the paywall bit.
Yeah,
So
go into
go
sort of societal breakdown of White Island and really get down into the minutiae of the
Yes, the nitty
detail.
gritty, what the policies would be, who would be allowed, who wouldn't, what women's role would be. We'll get into that on nickdixon.net. And thank you for everyone subscribing. It's going so many subscribers lately. It's amazing. So I really appreciate all your support. But now we will crack on with Elon Musk versus MAGA. Now, what happened if you missed it? There was a dispute over the H-1B visa. Sounds a bit boring, but actually it was a deep civil war in MAGA. So Elon Musk he kind of got into just in a few Twitter replies talking about why we need this skilled immigration for the top 0.1% of engineers. And the claims coming back were, well, actually, these visas don't really do that. They're a scam, as Steve Bannon puts it. And what they do is just get you a load of accountants and various sort of mid and low level jobs. And somehow these people come in, they get their dependents to come in, and the whole thing's a bit of a scam. Musk got very defensive and told people, referencing Tropic Thunder, he told people to take a step back and go F themselves in the face, and he will go to war on this to a level that you cannot comprehend. Although later he calmed down and ended up saying, yeah, it does need to be revised. I've always said that. So it was very strange. There was the kind of factual, like, is H1B effective or not? Does it do what it's intended to do? And then there was a kind of ideological divide, and Musk ended up calling everyone racist. And it was really about the ideological divide in MAGA. So you've got the 2016 Steve Bannon MAGA, which is about economic nationalism, as he calls it. It's jobs for American workers. It's America first. Then you've got the Musk MAGA, which is completely different. It's just he's just hopped on board, basically a Democrat who's hopped on board last minute for all the good things he's done with X. In this, he didn't come out well, in my opinion, because he's hopped on board. Now he's telling Republicans what they should be. He's calling them racist, which they've had 8 years of. And as I said, mainly from blue-haired substitute teachers, now from the richest man in the world. So it's a kind of an upgrade, but it's still essentially just being called racist and told what the Republican Party is by a Johnny come lately. And and Vivek Ramaswamy was the other key figure who wrote this long and bizarre post talking about how sort of nerds are the best, and you need to be a first generation Indian immigrant working hard, doing science competitions at the weekend, but not like the jocks. And he went through and criticized sort of archetypal American TV shows. And I thought he really missed the mark because, as I said in my video, the American hero is a mixture of smart and masculine excellence. It's JFK, it's Neil Armstrong. You can go right through the American canon of heroes. They're guys who they can do attitude. They get even Trump is one. He was an athlete in his youth, and they get out there, they get it done. But they're also smart. But they're not nerds. They're never just nerds. The nerd has a place, but the place is not at the front. People have said this. They can't be the leader necessarily. The whole culture can't be nerd culture. And Steve Bannon has had some sort of brilliant takedowns of like this revenge of the nerd thing. You only exist because we provide the platform for you nerds to even exist. Like he's just like hammered them. It's so good, and that's kind of my take. It was what was shocking was Musk's tone and Vivek's tone, the lack of understanding for normal Americans, the lack of understanding that we've had years and years of DEI. White people have had years and years of being cast out of the workplace, of being essentially racially targeted. They're all sick of it. And the last thing they want to hear is, oh, and now you lot are lazy and stupid. Musk replied to a tweet calling people that retarded. And he was like, basically Americans. And he went, yeah, basically, this is it. They're basically calling Americans mediocre and dumb and need to be replaced by high IQ Indians. And people have said, well, we're not mediocre and dumb. Yes, we've been ostracized. We've not been trained properly. We've been kept out of the workplace, but we're not dumb. And if India was so great, why is India like India and America like America? So what about that as well? So there's so many arguments, but what was
Yeah.
your overall take, Paul?
So, I mean, I have a little bit of experience with this. I come from a tech background, and it's really important to understand that tech people, tech bros, tech sisters, whatever, they have a hubris all of their own. And the reason they do is twofold. They probably went through high school, and it was probably quite challenging for them because they wouldn't have been seen as the jock types, and they would have felt very undervalued. And also, the world runs on tech, and we now find ourselves with these people believing that they run the world. Now, some of the biggest projects I ever worked on, things like London Cycle Hire, which became Barclays Bikes or Boris's Bikes and later Santander, you had two warring factions throughout. You had the tech team, and by the way, no business or no project can deliver without that tech team. They hold the cards on everything. And then you have the business leaders who are saying what it should look like and managing it from a business perspective. Okay, and they clash. Both believe that they know better than the other. So you end up, what I'm trying to point out is there is this dynamic that most of society don't see. You do have sort of the revenge of the tech bro going on here. They found this is their time, and it very much is their time. Technology is everything, and AI is the future, etc., etc. And they sit behind it all. And Vivek and Elon and people like that will see themselves very much at the top of that Christmas tree. So what's happening here is you can almost park the general society type stuff, and you can look at this as a separate faction. You've got this technical tech bro faction who believe who are full of hubris and believe they are better. Genuinely, they will believe that they are better. Now, I used to be the systems integration test manager for Cycle Hire. And what that meant was my job was to lead the team and that delivered all the back end testing and devised all the back end test plans. And at the very beginning of the project for Cycle Hire, it was very much a local business near to me that had been employed by TfL to do so. And it became very obvious very quickly that massive IT projects like that require a certain level of expertise that we didn't have. Now, I managed to stay in my role, but basically what was bussed in was a massive group of very well qualified, very experienced, largely Indian origin test engineers. And they were male and female. And man, was the culture different. A, they were shit hot, technically shit hot. And B, they worked in a different way than my previous team would have done. None of this 9 to 5 business. It would have been Monday to Sunday, and it's done when it's done, etc. Totally different outlook. And I think what's happened to people like Elon and Vivek is that it's skewed their view of this argument. They've not been able to see this within the spectrum of the debate that everybody else has done. So first thing we should do here is park the race element of it. It's nonsense, okay? Now, as with any of these debates, there will be a very small element of people who are just in it for the racism element. We can park those. That exists in all debates, and it's not important. It doesn't matter. Um, However, I listened to your video. I've listened to your video a couple of times actually, and if you haven't, then definitely go out and do so. It's very informative, very well narrated. I like that narration style, by the way, Nick. More of that, please. But so what you managed to successfully point out is that you've this is not that you've got this sort of, we're trying to make America or wherever, Great Britain, Europe, whatever, great again, wherever you might be. And in order to do so, you've got to ship absolutely all the best from all the world to get in. And essentially that means no borders, no US, no UK, whatever it might be, which totally goes against what MAGA is all about. Now, you've got a decision to make at this point. You either keep doing that or you try and build from within. And one thing we've never done really in the West, or at least that's the way it feels to me, is we've never built from within. We've never built from the bottom up and tried to create that. That doesn't mean you can't have a certain amount of expertise come in and help you build, but you don't have to take all that expertise from outside and bring it in. You just don't have to do that. There'll be people listening to this that see the H1B, which by the way sounds like some sort of virus, argument totally differently, and they'll believe that what you've got to do is get the best in. Well, this is absolutely fascinating, because essentially what you've got is a microcosm of the left and the way that they think about everything now within the right, and kind of infecting MAGA in some way. I'd be interested to know how Donald, or Daddy, as Elon and Vivek call him, feel about this.
Yes, well, that's the key thing. And the last I heard on that was he did sound like he was siding with Musk, because he did a New York Post piece where he said, I've got H1B people, they're in my properties. And it's like, well, you mean the gardener? It's not like the same thing. And then he shared a post for Musk as well that sort of indicated he was on Musk's side. So early indications that Trump has sided with Musk. Now, Trump can always course correct. He can see that, oh, that's not popular, and he can change his mind. And so let's wait and see. But he may well, because his campaign was based on high skilled legal immigration this time. It was very different to the 2016, and it was about tackling illegal immigration. So he may side with him. If he does side fully with Musk, it's a big mistake, especially after Musk and Vivek have insulted everyone. Maybe the compromise is Musk has toned down his rhetoric, which he seems to have, which he has to do, because his tone was wildly off. I mean, when you're the richest man in the world who owns this massively influential platform and so many other things, to be going like, I'm going to go to war on this, like, you're going to war on the American people. This is how it felt. And I'm obviously English, so obviously I can't speak totally for Americans. This is how it felt to me, putting myself in that position. It was like, hang on, you're going to war on us when we've already been attacked. Because it's a very similar experience as being a white guy in England as an American. You've been attacked for so many years, and now you're going to war on us, and you're bringing in other people to replace us. It's like, it's a horrible, horrible thing to do. So, but I don't think Musk grasped that. He seemed like it looked like he felt he was under attack and lashing out, and I just don't think he grasped that at all. But
Yeah, he showed a lack of emotional intelligence. But then again, I mean, this guy is arguably the brightest guy on planet Earth to some degree, particularly within his field. Undoubtedly. I mean, he does things every 10 minutes that I could only ever wish to do every 10 years, So we don't want to undermine any of that. I think it's important to remember, within context and within this technology world, he will have seen, in order for him to be successful, he needs H1B in some way. And I think if the argument had just been about some of the value of H1B, and and perhaps then just compared it with some of the negative stuff about H1B, it would have just been a relatively normal debate, and maybe it would have been left thinking, well, we're not too sure what he thinks. And for when it first kicked off, I was thinking, what's all the fuss about? And it wasn't until Vivek and Elon started sort of essentially personally attacking anybody that disagreed with him. It's like, whoa, okay. So this, by the way, is what we're trying to avoid on the right. We're trying to avoid. So that type of tactic is very much of the left. You don't need to do that. You can have a different type of debate.
That was one thing, but it was also the philosophical debate. So let me just come back to your previous point. Yeah, Musk, of course, incredibly competent in his areas. I think Dominic Frisby was saying on a podcast is like maybe the most effective and competent person in the world. There's certainly a case for that. So
Uh-huh.
you know, only idiots claim otherwise. Lefty idiots claim that he's dumb or something.
Agreed.
But,
Yeah.
but this is politics, and in politics, he's always seemed to me chaotic. And people are comparing to Iron Man. I've said he's more like the Incredible Hulk because we don't know which side he's going to come down on, but he'll go in hard. And you're like, okay, he's got it wrong on this one because he's not a politician, and in politics, he's just something he's waded into. So it's very different from being highly competent at building rockets and electric cars. And here he's just completely got it wrong. But there's also an ideological divide here. It's not just the infighting. It's he sees America as a sports team. He kept saying that's the right mental construct. That was an exact quote. You should see America as a sports team. And you go, okay, so at that level though, and I compared it actually to the modern sports team, the modern football teams owned by some oligarch. They have players from around the world, and you sort of go, is this my local team anymore? That's really the key. Is America just a sports team that wants to beat the other sports team, e.g., China, at all costs? But what is the cost? If you brought in 100% Chinese people, which you could fill America with Chinese people and still have China because there's a population so big. What would be the point of beating China? So just an absurd example. So if you brought in 80% Indians, you would go, well, okay, so India beat China. It's a strange thing. It's like, do we want to win as America or do we want to become something else to win this economic game and this STEM war? You know, tech and AI, like you say, and manufacturing maybe. And that's the philosophical question. And then people say, well, hang on, we built all this. America's here because of something else. You arrived into this. Musk himself arrived into this. He's left South Africa, which is an absolute chaos. So why have you come to America? There's something about it that you don't get in South Africa, you don't get in India. And why are the Indians coming here? And people say, why can't they build it in India if it's just fundamentally Indian? So it's something about bringing in a certain level of high IQ people into the fundamental structure of America. And when you start to attack that structure and attack that way of life like Vivek did, you're completely missing the point. Because what's so bad about people hanging out on the mall? That seems like paradise to me now. You have people who had an instinctive shared culture and instinctive understanding. They knew they were safe. They had leisure time. These are good things. Because the funny thing is, I'm arguing for the non exceptional person. Now, I might look at my own life and say, not that I'm exceptional it's compared to Vivek or Musk, that would be absurd. But actually, the structure of my life's been a bit different. I've left all the people I knew at university, then all the people I knew in comedy. Now it's like, or not nearly all. So it's like I keep moving on at different times. I've moved on from like 3 or 4 different lives to try and be more. In my case, it's not to pursue material success, which is probably why I don't have loads of that, but it's to produce some sort of idea of truth or where I'm going, some sort of personal journey.
Yeah.
So I've lived a very different life, but actually probably more like theirs in its kind of structure, even though it's not tech based. But I'm actually advocating for the normal person because I always recognize most people shouldn't be like me. Even I'm advocating for the normal person with a stable family, with some leisure time, and all those things. And I end up sounding like a lefty, but society can only work if it's a decent deal for the normal person, right?
Yeah, and this is where I genuinely don't think that this particular episode needs to be held against them both. You know, for the rest of Trump's next term, would be interesting to see how we go from here. And of course, what we want is strong people with strong minds, and both of the characters that we're talking about are that some of the best, some of the best people in the world in their field. So they are themselves an argument in favor of their own argument to some degree. The point is, you don't need to make everybody else feel stupid. And the sports team thing falls down a little bit because what you end up doing is, of course, you end up filling a subs bench with people that you could have improved. Or even worse, they come off of that subs bench and go somewhere else. And they're ended up in football terms in this country, they end up in the conference leagues. And you create the rest, you end up with this Premier League situation where all the wealth is and none of the Americans or the Brits are, and then you end up with this lower league structure where everyone else is just getting on with it, and you create this sort of Brave New World situation where you've got alpha, betas, deltas going on, all over the place. So you don't need to do that, or if you do, you can certainly be a lot more emotionally intelligent about the way you debate it. So what you
To be
can see
fair, no
very
one thought
quickly.
emotional intelligence was Musk's strong suit. No one
No,
thought
no
that, right?
one did. No one did. And perhaps that's he does he need to. No one's going to tell Elon Musk what he needs to work on. Least of all me. Okay, but if you do have a certain amount of emotional intelligence and able to see the greater picture, um, then perhaps it would help. But successful people don't necessarily need emotional intelligence. They're not trying to. It's not about manipulation and winning hearts and minds. It's about having an idea and delivering that idea. The most successful people go, "This is what we need to do," and then they go and bloody do it. And that's exactly what Elon has done. So all power to his elbow. I just think
Yeah.
on this particular matter, it could have been dealt with differently, and probably not on Twitter. And there was all these kind of rumors on the Sunday and the Monday about how right wing blue check accounts had been sort of demonetized and unchecked. And I don't know how much of that was proven to be true or false. But even if one account has been unchecked on the basis that they agreed with Elon Musk, I quite
Didn't
frankly
agree
would
with
be.
him.
I didn't agree with him. Sorry, I quite frankly would be very concerned about that.
Yeah,
There's no place for that now.
yeah, that was the rumor that conservative accounts were losing their blue checks, losing their monetization because they disagree with them. And like I said, I never checked that for certain either, but that would be terrible if so, as you point out. Yeah, he's speaking as a factory worker. He's speaking as a highly effective industry leader, factory worker guy who is prepared to go on the factory floor and sleep there while his workers solve it, and that's why his workers love him and all that kind of thing. Great, but he's not speaking as an American. He's speaking as I need this cheap labor to. And yeah, if you're working on these multiple businesses, it must be incredibly difficult, and we can't imagine the challenges and so on. When you've had a tiny taste of it, in that thing you're talking about, it's like imagine you're Musk running trying to get to Mars. Yeah, it must be insane, but still, that's fine. You're speaking as a industry person, but then you're in politics now. That's the problem. So you
Yeah.
want to be part of the MAGA campaign. If he wasn't part of the MAGA campaign, it was just Elon Musk going, "I want these visas," you'd be no problem. But it's like you're part of the MAGA campaign. You got elected by Trump got elected, but this movement that you jumped onto was elected by the American people wanting America first, not wanting your cheap workers.
Also, one thing we haven't really covered about this is the exploitation of something like H-1B.
Yeah,
So my understanding is that in the dying days of the Biden administration, they're extending the scope of H-1B to make it very difficult for Trump's administration to do anything about it very quickly. So that in itself is a problem.
yeah.
So in this whole debate's going on over here, but what really has happened is that Biden has whipped the carpet out from under Donald Trump and his administration, and uh, and I think that's just as big an issue.
Yeah, it's going out to accountants and all sorts of people who shouldn't be coming in, and then they bring in their family, and this is where you get into the meritocracy. It's like you want this meritocracy, but the people you're bringing in don't respect meritocracy. They bring in their family and all their mates and stuff. This is because other cultures don't have the same rules about fair play as we do. They have just different understanding of things. Most cultures, to be honest, are about their own people getting ahead. It's only us that are stupid enough to believe in some sort of fair play. But can I just add one other thing? It's adding to something I've already said. Even Scott Adams, who was on Musk's side very clearly during this, points out that you can't have DEI. There was an absurd thing that started happening where people claimed that it was DEI to want to prefer Americans in America. It was this absurd kind of rhetoric where, like, oh, so you want DEI? It's like, no, we don't want DEI. We just want Americans to prosper in America. That's not DEI, you idiot. I mean, calling that DEI is one of the dumbest things. Scott Adams put it better. He said, "Here's what I learned this week. Asking white American workers to accept the overt racism of DEI at the same time as importing foreign workers is obscene. And I'm in favor of foreign workers for the future success of America if we select for the ones who are additive to our economy. Put a stake through DEI and the conversation will look a lot different. Fixing the H-1B system while DEI lives is an insult, a deep one. If the MAGA folks want to hold the H-1B system hostage politically until DEI is treated as the crime that it is, I'm on board. At some point, the insult counts more than the GDP. We are there." And this is it. If you've there was a stats about 6% of American of straight white men being hired. I need to check that stat, but the point is, for a long time, straight white men have been actively kept out, particularly, and white people in general. Oh, this was the stat. What percentage? This was from Grok. What percentage of new jobs have gone to white males in America from 2021 to 2024? And the answer was approximately 6% of the new jobs added by SDP, S&P 100, SDP, S&P 100 companies in the US went to white males. So 6% in those 3 years. And they're being kept out deliberately. We know this. So this is a massive kind of racist uh, attack on white men that's been going on for a long, long time. So as Scott Adams says, you have to fix that because at the moment you've got this overt attack, and at the same time saying you're stupid and we need these other people. It's like no, up yours, and that's what everyone's saying.
Yeah, it feeds into so many other concerns of the MAGA movement that people weren't just going to let it slide. It was as simple as that, basically. There was going to
Yeah.
be a huge amount of resistance to it.
And one more word on racism. People inevitably call you racist here, and it's like I got called that on GB News, and my response, I believe, was I was just like I watched it back. I was like, it's so funny because at this point, it's like, yes, as I said to you before we were recording, some get you chase someone down the street, you call them a racial slur and beat them up. Yes, okay, I'll say that's racism. Most of it though is used as a way to silence white people, shame them. It's used to just shut down a debate and make you feel bad. It's just banal. It's like like the point on GB News was like, oh, and a lot of these people are racist. Yeah, some of them might be, but whatever. It's like most of this isn't about that. It's like, and it's not racist to want your own people to do well in your own country. It's just I'm just sick of that crap, and when I'm just not doing it anymore. So when people say it now, it just bounces off. And that was a big mistake that Musk made. It's like you think you're going to attack us by calling us racist? And he's like, well, I say us or the American people. It's just like whatever, mate. They've had it for 8 years, whatever.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. At some point, we'll go so far that people will start condoning, supporting racism. It'll get to the point where, in the end, it'll just be like, look, guys, everyone's slightly racist. On average, most people are 18% racist. Can we just accept that? And we'll just all carry on and it will hold no weight. And then, Twitter would just have about 12 people on it because nobody will really have any point to make anymore.
Yeah, and the idea that you have to import endless people and destroy your own country, or at least let them take over the country. Let's not even say destroy. That 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 can't be called racism anymore. It's just like it's so stupid. Anyway, there's one last thing I want to do, just more fun on that, is this idea of a jock. I mean, it's not like I'm claiming I'm a jock either. It's so funny. It's like in many of these things, I support positions that are not really me. I support the family, but I just live a weird atomized life. I live like the ultimate liberal in a sense. So on the jock thing, I was just thinking about it. I was like, I'm not the archetypal nerd like the maths nerds, but of course, nor am I the jock. But of course, that's a silly way to divide people. Anyway, ultimately, people aren't just one or the other. I mean, I played football at school. I play five-a-side once a week. I go and do my weights in the gym, but then I'm also, rereading Lord of the Rings, and I don't know, looking at obscure political stuff, whatever. I mean, I'm kind of both, but it's not really about what you are yourself. It's about what's best for society and what represents America. But what do you think about that, Paul? I mean, you're probably not a jock, but you're probably not a nerd either.
Yeah, I did. So I did electronics engineering, which could be considered quite nerdy, but I very quickly found my way into sort of management type roles because my my ability to work with people far excelled my technical ability. So when you work, I always describe my career in technology and IT and stuff like that this way. Basically, because of the way I am, it became very apparent that I just worked with lots of people that weren't very good with other people, yet I was. So I found myself very quickly in a role that was basically, well, you can lead teams, and you can do so because you can actually look people in the eye and speak to people. So
Skills, eye contact.
I
Yeah, more than
benefited.
2 seconds.
Yeah, I benefited from that. I used to play a lot of sport when I was a kid. I was a decent footballer, played a relatively good standard all the way through my school age. But again, I never considered myself the jock type. I've always felt like I'm slightly on the outside, and I think a lot of people who sort of perhaps do what we do now have always felt that way anyway, sort of on the outside peering in. But what it does do, having touched on all of those things throughout our lives, it gives us an insight, and we can commentate on it. Um,
Yeah,
I, I, I,
we're in
I think
between.
to break it down to nerds and jocks is far too simplistic. That's not what's happening here. That is not what's happening here. We're not saying get rid of H1B, get rid of all intelligent techie people and replace them with people who can lift heavy things. No one is saying that. It's or someone who's just physically attractive. That's
Yeah,
not
yeah,
what's happening.
but it's how you respond to those people, isn't it? If you see and it's a kind of lefty type thing to see people who are successful or something appealing about them
Yeah.
and to hate it. I think it's healthy to not hate it. You see someone who's good at sports or something. I hate that guy. It's weird. So I think that's the difference is how you see that. And if you see it with the resentment, I see it differently. I'm like I've been given certain skills. I've been given certain abilities which have done okay for me, and I can't do other things. And I think that's fine. I suppose if you
Yes.
had no skills at all, you might feel bad. You remind me though of a couple of things. One is quite funny that you say you work with people that are difficult and can't work with us. I just thought, is this why we're doing this podcast? Like, just
This worked perfectly.
that's so funny.
I'm
That's
very
true. Paul is
accommodating.
known for getting on with everyone, and I am not known for that. But the other thing is funny is you reminded me of that guy from Office Space. Remember the film? The film keeps coming up because of the Elon Musk meme where he's saying, "What would you say you do here?" Because he's in there in the Doge Department of Government Efficiency trying to cut people. And that brilliant movie Office Space where they come in and say, "What is it you do here?" And there's that one guy who's like, "Don't you see? I work with I help the technical people talk to the other people because they're not engineers aren't good with people. I'm good with people. Why can't you see that?" He ends up screaming at him. Do you remember that guy? You're basically that guy. Going, why can't you see I'm good with people? So you're the go-between guy, right?
Yeah, I did a lot of that sort of stuff. A lot of stuff between sort of, you know, customer leaders and the technical side of things. I did some, I used to give training courses on some of the stuff I worked on because basically I could stand up and present. Um, and it just worked well. I took the skills that I had. I had qualifications and I had certain other life skills, and I put the two together, and I managed to create a career for myself to some degree. And with regards to not being envious of others, well, that's exactly it, isn't it? I think you should be inspired by people that are good at stuff. I'm always inspired by very good athletes, and I'm inspired by Elon Musk. I couldn't achieve either of those things. I'm not going to win the Premier League. I'm not going to be Elon Musk, but I couldn't even be Luke Littler. I'm watching the darts a lot at the moment. I've got the physique, and I can throw the arrows okay, but not to the extent that he can. But I can. That's the whole point of enjoying sports, isn't it? Because we can't do it ourselves. There's nothing wrong
Yes.
with it.
And sports has been quite humbling for me because I'm used to doing things that I'm quite good at, whether it's like podcasts, writing, anything brain work, and especially to do with words and language and music. I'm pretty good. So there's areas where I'm good, and I'm used to just coming in and being like, "Yeah, watch me smash this," And exams, I was always very good at, and all that. So those are areas I'm strong in. But then me playing football in our five-a-side team, I'm definitely not. I'm middle of the pack at
Right.
best. And as more and more good players come in, I can creep down a bit toward the lower end sometimes. I'm like, wow, but I'm decent. I can pass, I can score, I can tackle, I can all that stuff. My fitness always questionable. But there's players who they're so much better, and I'll never be like that. And then there's the fit guys who never played as a kid. You can see them, but it's always humbling for me to play football and go, why am I playing this? I'm not. This is not something I'm okay, but I'm not like great because I'm used to doing things that I'm just inherently, just instinctively good at. But it is important to do the other things and sort of
Yeah, of course.
yeah,
My assumption is you're doing it because you enjoy it, Nick.
must be.
Tuesday nights are often wet and cold, man. So you must be getting something out of it.
Oh yeah, I love playing when it's wet and cold. That's when I thrive because we got an Italian player who's really good, but he doesn't do quite as well in heavy rain. And I'm like, right, come on, heavy rain, because I'm from the lakes. I was like, you think rain is your friend? You really adopted the rain. I was born in it, molded by it. And then I'm just like, right, and I just have a perverse pleasure for playing in the rain and cold. I'm like, right, come on, lads, this is my time. Um, let me just all right, so we did that must story, and we could do that must story for probably hours,
Yeah,
although
sure.
it somehow diverted into me talking about football. But just before we go on YouTube and audio, should we do one more,
Yeah,
which I
cool.
think we'll do our next story, which is about Kemi, Ula Kemi, whatever she's called, Bain. I just somehow saw a full name on Wikipedia there. I'm trying to find the piece, but she did. There's a few different Kemi and Farage stories this week. So the first was the ticker, the famous Reform ticker. Reform are having this ticker that kept going up, saying, "Look at our members. We're going to beat the Tories' members." And Kemi decided to say that was a fake, and she'd been in the back end, and she can see it's completely false, and the members aren't really going up like that. And Reform said, well, you can't see our back end. And yes, they are going up. And we'll open it up to Sky and The Spectator and others. And we'll show you this is real. And then they seemed to verify that it was real. And so that was a
Have they
bizarre
done that now,
choice.
Nick? Sorry to
Uh,
stop you, but I couldn't find any evidence that Reform had actually opened up their back end to prove. I mean, I'm not
yeah.
suggesting that they're lying, but I didn't know if they'd
No,
shared
it was
that.
seen by people at various publications who said
Right.
yes. as far as we can see, this is real. Yeah, they insisted on doing that. So that was a very odd thing.
Yes.
Um, then there's kind of like three stories. She then had a meeting with GB News that we don't know too much about, but she was sort of saying that they gave too much time to Farage. I mean, their flagship presenter, and that maybe I don't know what was said in the meeting, but there's this implication that she was upset about that and said it shouldn't be a haven for anti-Kemi sentiment was one of the, I'm paraphrasing, but haven was used, stuff like this. And you're going like, I don't know if this is how things work in Nigeria, but you can't really just come and say, can you just tone down the Farage stuff? It's a mad thing to do. I mean, maybe she didn't want it to leak, but that coming out, it doesn't look good. And then there was then there was just the third thing, which was just the thousands of members going across to reform. And some of this was a result of the publicity around the ticker controversy. But there was just more and more people going across to reform. And according to Farage, was it 6,000? Oh, here we are. It's signing up to 6,000 members a day. So this was it. I'm just looking at this story in real time. Kemi Bay not driving 6,000 to join Reform UK each day. This comes from the Times, and this was Farage's claim. So multiple Kemi stories, and it's not going very well for her. And of course, nothing against her personally, but I was one of the people that said, yeah, she shouldn't be the leader. Jenrick is the better choice of those. And other people said she should. Toby Young notably said it a lot, but it turned out she then gave him a peerage. So like at least that made sense in some way. But I do wonder why people wanted Kemi, and I think it's proving now that she doesn't really know what she's doing. But what do you think, Paul?
Well, the reason this looks bad is because she's not doing well. I don't think it's unusual for leaders of parties to have meetings with TV execs to try and garner more support. I think that's probably gone on since television and time began. Newspapers, etc., etc. So I don't think it's that unusual that she sat down with Angelos and had a chat, and as part of that chat said, "You know what? I mean, I don't know for certain, but I imagine the conversation was more about, well, how does it really work with Ofcom and Farage? It would have been a little bit more surreptitious than. But then again, Kemi, as we're now seeing, can be quite a blunt tool. So over the Christmas period, it was a stunt by Farage. Another brilliant political stunt, by the way, projecting the ticker number onto Tory HQ. Reform numbers going up, going up, going up. And of course, all of this is kind of shrouded in mystery anyway, because this relies on electronics and Kemi is a technical person, so perhaps she did have some insight. I don't know. It seemed a little silly to have done what she did. But also, we don't really know how many members there are of the Tory party. It's uh, rumoured to be about 131, 132,000. And it's going to be in that region anyway. And we now, as far as I can tell, have about 150,000 reform. So it's kind of mute. Anyway, it doesn't really make any difference. Reform have probably got more members than the Tory party now. And if I was Kemi Badenoch, I wouldn't be concerning myself with what's going on with Reform, because that is happening, and it's happening big time. What I would be doing is trying to focus on how she can capitalise on what's going on with Labour and bolstering the Tory party in some way and winning back some of that trust that's quite unequivocally lost. Okay, and alongside this, of course, we've got Tories for Jenrick or Conservatives for Jenrick, which is a sort of movement, activist movement going on in the background. And there are rumours over the last couple of days that what we're going to see is a leadership battle between, sort of kicking Kemi out again, because there's been no good news since she's got on board. And maybe she's a little bit weaker than some people thought she would be, because when it comes to PMQs, she struggles a little bit. But as I've said on our pod before, one of the reasons she struggles is she's at this kind of pantomime where everybody's in support of Keir Starmer, because he's got a vast majority sat behind him who, cheer when he speaks and boo when she speaks. However, you can overcome that. Someone like, I think, Farage could probably overcome that to some degree. And we're not seeing it with Kemi. She's kind of this diminutive character sometimes. So she barks very loudly, but then you'll see photographs of her and she looks kind of like a little old lady almost. Now, she's not an old lady. I think she's probably younger than me. But she's got that sort of I don't know, just body language style that doesn't look very leadership esque. I'm not sure whether I know you definitely think it, but I'm not sure if Robert Jenrick is the solution. I think ultimately what's going to happen is you're going to see reform, as long as Labour allow them to have local elections, win more and more council seats in local elections, and build grassroots activism so that when it gets to the next general election, we're going to see perhaps 80 to 100 reform seats. Now, some might say that that actually be far, far higher, and perhaps they would become the leaders in some way. I'm not saying that's not possible, but I can see Labour seats going to reform. I can see Tory seats going to reform. I can see Lib Dem seats going to reform. Not a lot of people would say this. I don't think either, but I think all colours could go reform blue. Uh, maybe not in the numbers that are required, but because a lot of people are getting more and more fed up with what they're seeing, and it's not, anecdotally, it feels to me that reform are British politics. If I'm at a party, or just a gathering and people are talking politics, they'll come up to me because they'll think that's what I'm interested in doing because they see me on GB News, etc. 99 times out of 100, they'll want to talk about reform. What's going on with reform? Do you know Nigel Farage? Do you know anything from the inside, etc., etc.? So it feels anecdotally that reform are becoming British politics because Keir Starmer is just being left to his own devices because there's no real opposition. Unfortunately, Kemi Badenoch has not really produced any strong opposition yet. It could still swing in our favour because I think over the next 6 months we're going to see Keir Starmer coming under more and more scrutiny. I think a lot of those sort of things where he's kind of gone, he's talked the country down and he said things like, "Well, we have to do the tough things now," without offering any sort of, uh, sunlit uplands. This is how it's going to look beyond this bad stuff. It's just, we're in a bad place. It's going to be bad for a while, and it will be bad after that. Keep voting Labour, and it's like, what are you talking about, mate? This is talking, and the economy is suffering as a result. So I think there's still opportunity for Kemi to have a resurgence. But ultimately, I can't see any other party than Reform really capitalising on that.
Yeah, and we were thinking about doing later in the show this piece about how Britons believe 2025 will be worse than 2024 and how they don't believe in Labour at all. So we might get onto that. But just on Kemi, yeah, a few things just to confirm those quotes. So uh, I found the correct article, and the Haven quote, which I mentioned, was she was worried about. I've lost it again. Oh, yeah. She was worried. She said the channel should not be a haven for my critics. This is in the Times. And then there's this other part where an ally of Badenoch told the Mail on Sunday Kemi had a good meeting with GB News, which was mostly about her doing more with the channel. She did ask about the status of programs fronted by politicians and where GB News stood with the regulator. I suppose it depends on the nature of that question. There's ways you could ask, "Oh, so what are the rules about that?" That must be weird. That's one way of asking. Another is, "Why is Nigel Farage on so much attacking me all the time?" That's another way of asking it. So, and can we get rid of it? That's a very different way. I'm not saying she said that, but and GB News said the meeting was very constructive. So we don't know anything about this, guys. People message me all the time. What's happening at GB News? I don't know what's happening at GB News. I'm just a tiny cog in the machine, and this is all at a much higher level. So I don't know about these things, but who knows what happened at that meeting? So that's that. You said mute when you meant moot, Paul, and the only reason I say
I
that,
did say that's a
the only
good
reason I
point.
say it is
Actually,
because a comment. I hate to say it because it's rude, but a comment will say it if I don't mention it.
yeah,
They'll
no,
put a
I
comment, and
did.
I couldn't live with that.
I thought about correcting myself at the time, but by the time I realised that I'd done it, it was too far, and I thought, you know what, I quite like the interaction, even if it's negative.
Well, I shouldn't correct you, but I could just see a tweet or YouTube comment or Substack comment saying it, and I just
Paul
couldn't
Cox
live
said
with them
mute.
saying it, and it might mean thinking I didn't notice it, and I would just hate them. I'd hate the whole thing too much. So, anyway, on immigration, I've written down because Kemi, one big part of her weakness is that she presided over the Boris wave. She was there for the whole Boris wave, which destroyed what was left of this country with the obscene amounts of immigration. And she has that clip of say, of sort of advocating the uncapped migration in 2018, I think it was. So that's a big problem for her. And as you say in the Commons, in general, yes. When have the Tories last had a leader who had charisma? The answer is Boris. When have they last had a leader of charisma and substance? Thatcher would be my answer. So very rare that you get both. And when I say Jen, it would have been better. I just believe he was red pilled on the immigration question, and I believe he had serious policies about it. I don't think he has the charisma either. Clearly, Farage trounces him all in that. It's very rare you get both. Someone who, because the charisma types tend to be a little bit bad on detail. They have to have some policy wonk doing the detail, and then the detail people are not charismatic. So Kemi talks about, well, we're quietly working in the background on our policies. It's like that only works if you still have a party left. If Farage is just decimating you, you won't have a party. Now, the poll I saw from More in Common had Reform on 67 seats, but you think it could be? You've seen ones where it's even more.
Yeah, I have. I've seen ones where it's sort of 70 or 80, if not a little bit higher, sort of Ed Davey esque. And perhaps that'll open up, theme parks to him. He's not really doing theme parks at the moment, Farage, and I think he's missing a trick. He should lighten up a bit. He's doing the whole walking the dog and drinking pints, but why not do that in a theme park, Nick?
It is extraordinary how our system still makes it so hard for reform, isn't it? When they have all the momentum, Tories seem to be dead, but yet these predictions still give the Tories 200 something seats, even though they're doing basically nothing.
I will say that, and I was in support of Kemi Badenoch. I will say, however, the more time goes on, the more I think anyone who doesn't think we would need to leave the ECHR to help us solve the illegal immigration issue is stupid. I mean, I was going to say at best a little silly or misunderstood or mistaken, but actually, you've got to be pretty stupid not to see that quite clearly you've got to take back control. And we wouldn't just turn into this. We wouldn't turn into some Nazi state. That's always the argument from the left. Why the ECHR was introduced after World War II to prevent the Nazis ever happening again. Yeah, we led it after defeating the Nazis, by the way, and we're quite capable of living without an ECHR. And the ECHR has been captured by left-wing zealots and human rights lawyers who just want to make a quick quid. So we would need to leave the ECHR eventually. I think it's inevitable to do so. And the fact that Kemi, I mean, she played it in a relatively intelligent way and sort of said, well, we need to step back, we need to have a look, etc. But I'll be all the time she carries on with that line. I don't think she's the right person to solve the problem. And of course, all the while, Nigel Farage is saying exactly that. He's saying this is a problem and this is how we fix it. It's very straightforward, guys.
You went in pretty hard on Kemi there. I was surprised. But Paul, it is simpler just to agree with me in the first place. I said Kemi was not the right choice. It's a simple
No, I
life
can't go that
life
far,
lesson. But you went in pretty hard there. And what was I going to say? I was going to add one thing to that, which I suddenly forgot. What's wrong with me today? I'm sorry, guys. I keep forgetting stuff. I'm a bit tired. And I think we've done a good chunk there, though, for the free people on YouTube and the audio. Thank you so much for watching/listening. We're going to go into the paywall section where Paul's going to give his real views on the illegal immigration question. He was telling me before, just water cannons is what he said. 2 words,
Straight in the
water
face.
cannons. Yeah.
Children
And,
first.
yeah, that was his phrase. Water cannons, children first. Vote Paul. Yeah, we're going to talk about Fraser Nelson's absurd article and his bizarre utopian Britain that doesn't really exist. We're going to talk about probably this 2025 article. Will it be worse than 2024? And maybe we'll do some predictions and resolutions. And we might do Bridget Phillipson. We won't do Bridget Phillipson, but we might discuss. We don't really have time for Canada, but that's another story. Poilievre is surging ahead of Trudeau in the polls. But we'll definitely do Fraser Nelson and some other ones and some interesting stories. So go and get that at nickdixon.net if you are so inclined. Thank you so much for watching. Like and subscribe on YouTube. Paul is at Paul Cox Comedy. And anything you'd like to say, Paul, before we go behind the paywall?
Happy New Year to all our YouTube and free viewers and listeners. Thanks for listening.
How can I forget? I forget what day it even is, guys. Every day is the same for me. Happy New Year to all the freeloaders. And we'll see the rest of you on nickdixon.net.